What's up guys, Kaplow here for another Cyberpunk Basic.
Alright, let's get into the different major types of ranged weapons that you can use in Cyberpunk 2077. There are tech weapons, smart weapons, power weapons, and thrown weapons. I will review the basics of each weapon type and how you can effectively use them in combat. Let's start with tech weapons. The major draw of tech weapons is that when you charge them, you can fire through cover. You can clear an entire room without even entering it. Let's look at an example here where I fire through a barricade. Now let's check it out in action. That guy seemed to think that a boulder would protect him from my tech rifle. As you can see, cover ain't got nothing on tech weapons. If you don't want to fire through walls, then you can always fire from the hip. If you're aiming down the sights, then you will always charge before firing. One thing that will benefit you when fighting with tech weapons is to use the ping quick hack. Ping allows you to see everyone and everything for a short period of time. This way you can see your enemies even if you're sitting behind cover yourself, and then you can just fire right through it. Overall, tech weapons are a great way to exploit your enemy's insistence on using cover. There is one major drawback to using tech weapons though. If you want to aim down the sights, then you need to charge every time you fire. This is generally not a major issue, but needing to charge can leave you exposed, and firing from the hip is generally not advised in long-range firefights. Now let's move on to smart weapons. The fun part of smart weapons is that once you get a lock on an enemy, you can fire just about anywhere and the bullets will track to your target. Just make sure to keep your targets inside of a large rectangle in the middle of your screen. If you are behind cover yourself, you can fire over or around your cover so that you can take out your enemies without exposing yourself. You can see some examples here. On top of the ability for spray and pray to be a valid strategy, your smart weapons will highlight all the enemies and cameras in the area so you can plan out what you want to shoot next. There are a few drawbacks though. One, you need to install cyberware in order to lock onto your targets. There is the typical SmartLink hand augmentation, but you can also get this tiger claw tattoo in the event that you don't want your character to look like a robot. Two, the bullets fire more slowly, but that's honestly not that big of a deal, especially since they're going to hit your enemy anyway. 3. If someone new gets into your face that you haven't locked onto, firing might send your bullets to another target who is not your immediate threat. You need to be very aware of your surroundings and plan out combat, because it is harder to react to sudden threats. I have a more Leroy Jenkins style of play, which is why I tend to not use smart weapons. 4. You need to have line of sight in order to be able to lock onto your target, which will expose you a bit, but that's just gunplay in general. Lastly, smart weapons do not reward ambush playstyles where you want to do a bunch of damage and drop back into cover. It requires a more methodical playstyle, which can also be a lot of fun, but it's not for everyone. Let's move on to power weapons. Power weapons would more appropriately be called traditional weapons, given the fact that they work like any other gun in real life. They don't shoot through cover, and you can't shoot them around corners. However, they do ricochet and they do more raw damage than other weapons. The previous version of the skill tree did allow for some pretty powerful builds around ricochets that did make for an exciting, powerful, and punishing style of play. But that was mostly gutted with 2.0, so ricochets are back to being a bit of a gimmick rather than a strategic playstyle. Despite no longer having use of that gimmick, I primarily use power weapons. They are more familiar for someone who came from other first-person shooters, and they allow you to easily jump in and out of cover for pot shots at your enemies. Now we know that power weapons do a bit more damage, but it feels like you sacrifice a ton of utility by not using smart or tech weapons. So where do power weapons really excel? Stealth and sniping. Power weapons are the only weapons in the game that allow you to use silencers, which you will need for gigs and missions that require a bit more discretion. On top of that, tech weapons might also have scopes, but tech scopes do not usually have the level of optical zoom that you can get with a power rifle. In this example, I'm using an awful scope on my power rifle, but it still has significantly more zoom than the tech rifle scope of the same caliber. The difference gets magnified even further when you move into epic and legendary scopes. Last up, we have thrown weapons. For me, the biggest upside of thrown weapons is that they're just fun as hell, especially in stealth. You can silently dispatch your enemies with a silenced pistol, but a thrown weapon works almost as well. Luckily, the fun factor more than makes up for any perceived shortcomings. Other than that, one of the great advantages of thrown weapons is that you don't need to be nearly as accurate in order to score headshots. What would have been a whiff with a pistol becomes a headshot with a thrown weapon, and most headshots tend to be one-hit KOs since every thrown weapon has significantly increased headshot damage. With a good thrown weapon build, you can keep throwing and throwing. That is of course until you miss and have to run around like an idiot waiting for your thrown weapon to return. Overall, each of the weapon types has their strengths and their weaknesses, and there are plenty of cool and iconic weapons that will support the way you want to play. If this was helpful, give it a like, think about subscribing, and good luck surviving Night City.